Hey there, I'm Melissa Batt, the host of Priorities on Purpose, a podcast for overwhelmed women who are tired of going through the motions. You know there has to be more to this life than the cycle of numbing out, scrolling social media, exhausting yourself with a never-ending to-do list, and still feeling like a failure at the end of the day. You have hope that tomorrow will be different, and I'm here to help you make sure that it actually is. I'm a Christian life coach, and on this podcast, we talk all about intentional living, mental health struggles, and tangible ways to be the best versions of ourselves with Jesus at the center. I promise to be your hype girl and biggest cheerleader as I share simple strategies to help you get out of your rut, eliminate distractions, and live the life you were created for. Are you ready to go beyond existing and learn how to truly live? Put your earbuds in and let's get to it, friend. Hey, friends, welcome back to another episode of Priorities on Purpose. I'm your host, Melissa Batt, Christian life coach and faith mentor. And today we're going to be talking about my current issue. Honestly, I have probably 5 episodes mapped out and written to be recording. And none of that is what we're going to be talking about today. But because this is an issue I'm currently struggling with, I thought, you know what? Instead of just ranting on social media about this, because I was talking about it in my stories, I think it will be an actual good episode. So today we're talking about ADHD and the MTHFR, if I said that right, gene mutation. Listen, disclaimer, I am not a doctor, not at all. If you followed me for a long time, you should know this by now. But just in case you didn't, I am not a doctor. I am just sharing my own personal experience as I have gone down this road of trying to figure out what the heck's wrong with me, because I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't figure out what it was, and I knew that it wasn't normal. Okay, so today's episode, we're talking about ADHD. Why are we talking about ADHD? Well, because I'm on day 2 of not taking my ADHD medication because I went to get it from the pharmacy and they were out. And I have really been struggling the last 2 days. And after talking to my husband and explaining to him why today has been so terrible, I realized that everything that's happened today is pretty much the same stuff that happens all the time. I just don't react to it the way that I'm reacting to it today. And then I was like, oh, maybe this has something to do with not taking my medicine. All right. So that's how we got here. Now let's go into all of this stuff. So I was not diagnosed as having ADHD or ADD until 2019, 2020. I can't remember, before pandemic for sure, but I have always struggled with a lack of focus. And I remember when I lived in South Carolina, I asked that doctor, like, I am pretty sure that I may have an issue. I may have ADHD because I cannot focus. It's been my biggest struggle for as long as I can remember. And that doctor said to me, you can't have ADHD because you would have already been diagnosed with it. You would have been diagnosed as a child if you had ADHD. And so I was like, oh, okay. I took that as it is what it is. I don't have ADHD. Don't have to worry about that. So I just dealt with it all that time. My whole entire life, I have dealt with it. And I now know why I was not diagnosed as a child. But first, I should tell you, like, when I moved to Kentucky, I was talking to my doctor in 2019 because I had just came out of like a major pit, like struggling hard, the hardest season I had ever came through. And I think that at this point, I was going to the doctor every month just to manage my anxiety and depression. Because when I tell you, like, I didn't even want to shower, like struggling to shower was an issue struggling to brush my teeth. I had zero energy. And like, if I was to shower that day, that would have been all I got done, because the lack of energy from the depression and everything was so real. And so I was seeing my doctor very regularly, just trying to get it managed. Now, for the record, I've struggled with anxiety and depression throughout my whole life. If you aren't new to this podcast, you already know that story. I've talked about it quite a bit. But there was something very specific that happened in my life that kind of took me back to this place of like, I can't get out of bed. I had managed it for a really long time without meds, with meds. I've never been someone who's had to stay on the meds. I've eventually got off of them. This is probably the longest I have went being medicated. And I am at this point totally okay with it, because I also recognize that I couldn't function without medication at this time. But I don't plan on staying on it forever. Okay. So as I was talking to my doctor, I was telling her how like I was still struggling a lot with being able to focus. And she asked, have you ever been tested for ADHD? And I said, no. I actually asked my doctor at one point, and he said that I definitely don't have it because I would have already been diagnosed as a child. And she said that isn't true, because back in the day, it looked different. And there's a lot of adults who have gone undiagnosed because their ADHD, especially in women and girls, it shows up differently. I didn't have the hyperactivity where I'm climbing the walls and all of that. I have the ADD part of it, the attention deficit, not the I'm so hyper, I don't know how to stand still. That's not what my life looked like ever. And so I think that's why I went undiagnosed. It showed up as daydreaming. I remember when I found, I think we were in the process of moving at one point, or going through like old stuff of my mom's, and I found an old report card, and on it in kindergarten, the note said daydreams a lot. I feel like a lot of my elementary school, like those were the notes. She daydreams a lot. So I'm just here to say that daydreaming isn't necessarily bad, because I'm still a dreamer today. I have big dreams and big goals, and ADHD can also be a superpower. It is one of my superpowers. There are some things I do so well because of ADHD. However, there are also some things that almost cripple me. And that's more of what this episode is about. So ADHD is my superpower. But today's episode, we're going to talk about the parts of it that I don't like, because it is so freaking hard. Okay. It's hard. So I wrote some notes, because obviously I'm unmedicated right now and it doesn't look very pretty. But my symptoms for ADHD was lack of focus, losing track of time. I'm always like, there's actually something called time blindness. And if you Google it, you will learn. And I know sometimes it's like, it sounds like an excuse. Like, we have a diagnosis for everything. I get it. And I somewhat agree with you. And just because you struggle with something doesn't mean it's then an excuse for you to stay that way. Like, I struggle with focus. I struggle with losing track of time. That doesn't mean I allow that to be an excuse to always be the case. I'm constantly working on trying to be better at time management and tracking my time well and all of that. So here's the symptoms again: lack of focus, losing track of time, zoning out or daydreaming, procrastinating on tasks that require concentration, like completing forms or working with numbers. For me personally, working with numbers is so hard. And also forgetfulness. I forget things a lot. And for years, I managed this. I did what I had to do to survive, and it was fine. It didn't show up a lot until probably 2018, I would say. Now, again, I haven't said this yet, but I'm about to. And that is that undiagnosed ADHD often shows up like anxiety. And I have been diagnosed with general anxiety disorder, and I have felt anxious probably my whole entire life. I just thought I was weird. I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it. But before I knew what anxiety was, I just thought I was weird. And I am weird. I will give you that. And I'm telling you, it wasn't probably until like 2016 that I even recognized what anxiety was. I didn't know it was anxiety. I just thought I was weird. And so again, undiagnosed ADHD often shows up like anxiety. And this is for boys and girls. Doesn't necessarily just have to be for girls. This is what I wrote. For years, I got by and managed it without medication or doing anything about it. Here's the thing. I got by. However, as I've gotten older, my mental load is at full capacity. And that's where I can't. I have to have 2 screens here because I can't remember something as simple as a 6-digit code. You know how for the 2-factor authentication, or you have to go from an email to put in a little code or whatever? I can't even remember a 6-digit code for 30 seconds. And numbers are even worse. It's so bad. And I coped with this for a really long time. I remember in my 31 days, I would have order forms, right? And so I could look at the order form and type in the personalization. I did 31. I was a top leader in the direct sales company, 31 Gifts. And I sold a lot of stuff. I had a huge team. I did all that and I got by, but I just learned how to cope with it, right? But there for a while, I would have to have my phone and my computer because I would misread the text or the address or the phone number, credit card numbers. Oh my gosh. If someone's tries to give you you're going to have to do one number at a time for me to get it, because it's I'm dyslexic when it comes to numbers now. Hasn't always been that way, but as I've gotten older, it's definitely that way. Up until today, I will say I still struggle, although medication does help. So obviously the second doctor I went to, she was like, well, I have the equipment here. Basically, all she had to do was hook me up to a computer. That office also had a psychiatrist in office. And so I think that's why, because you have to go through a psychiatrist, I think, to get diagnosed. So I went to a computer, I took this test, and she's like, yeah, you very much, I don't remember all the details. All I know is it was you absolutely have ADHD. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And I was like, really? All this time, I thought it was just me and I couldn't focus. And that's the thing I've struggled with the most. I can't focus. And up until recently, I think I thought I had it here. This is the first office I moved. I just realized that. I didn't put the note up in this office. For a long time, I had this note to myself that says, with a plan, I can focus to accomplish everything on my list. Make a plan, because as someone who flies by the seat of her pants, I never had a plan, which meant focusing was even more difficult than what it would be if just the ADHD part. And so there are things that we can do to make it easier for us. And if that's something you guys are interested in learning more about, obviously I'm happy to do more episodes on that. But I wanted to talk about this just in general, this ADHD thing, because I did not realize the difference between my brain working with the medicine when the medicine is working and when it's not. I forgot until the last 2 days. I've had some medication changes, and it wasn't until recently that I found the medication that, it's amazing and it actually works and I love it. And I'm like, wow, this is how other people's brains work. Are you serious? Because I had no idea my brain could operate as fully as it has while on this medication. It's the difference between, let's say, going to a mall and being completely blind with no help. Okay? That is how it feels to have ADHD and be unmedicated and without the help, some help. And there are lots of forms of help. It's not all as a medication and that kind of thing. But with help, the ADHD, it no longer feels blind. And I can actually get things done. And it's like the lights have been turned on. And I don't know if I'm doing a great job explaining it, but I'm just telling you it's night and day. So some of the medication I have tried, because I know someone's going to ask me this. First thing we tried was Strattera. It is a non-stimulant, and that's the route I wanted to go because I didn't want a stimulant if I didn't have to. And then from there, I tried Adderall because I thought everybody raved about Adderall. Adderall didn't work for me for a short term, like maybe 2 days. I can do okay on it, but it's too intense for me and it turns me into like a manic person. I don't like the way it makes me feel at all. And in between there, I've also tried like supplements, and sometimes the supplements would work and sometimes they didn't work. I'm currently on Vyvanse and I had never heard of it. My doctor suggested it. I said, okay. And so that's what I'm currently on. Vyvanse. But I also want to tell you that one of the things that I've been doing, because listen, I do not want to be tied to medication. My goal is to no longer need the medication. And so I'm doing all the things necessary to try not to need the medication anymore, like changing my diet, exercising, moving my body, getting enough sleep. Like those are some things that really can help. Another thing that I realized through trying to get off my medicine, and I've talked about the genetic testing I had done, was being tested for the MTHFR gene mutation. Listen, if you think you may have ADHD or you're struggling with anxiety, number one, you need to know if you have the MTHFR gene mutation. It's a very simple cheek swab. Find a doctor who will do it for you, because if that is an issue, getting that taken care of will help with the anxiety as well as a ton of other things. Because one of the symptoms of having this gene mutation is depression, fatigue, anxiety, chronic pain, nerve pain, headaches, migraines. All of those are symptoms of this gene mutation. So the other thing I want to tell you is basically the MTHFR gene mutation. This is a gene that tells your body how to make an enzyme, and this enzyme is important for the body to process folate properly. One of the things that I have found through research is that those who have ADHD may be deficient in the B9, which is folate. Do you see that connection? Okay. Let's see, what else did I have in here in my notes that I wanted to tell you? My diet. So I feel very strongly that God has given me this boundary, and crossing that boundary is detrimental to my health. And I honestly didn't necessarily recognize the connection between the MTHFR gene mutation and ADHD. I just felt like this might help me, so I tried it and it worked. And that is eliminating sugar and processed foods. And since then, I've read the research, and there's scientific proof that following a Mediterranean diet or a DASH diet, which basically just means eating more whole foods, clean foods, not processed, not all the seed oils and all of that. I'm sure I'm butchering it, but I'm not a doctor. You can do your own research, but I wanted to bring this up. Like, those things will affect my, like, the way my body produces what it needs to produce or something. I don't know. I eliminated sugar and processed foods, and all of a sudden I could think clearly. And then afterwards, I've read the research that shows that it is beneficial for someone who has ADHD or this gene mutation to follow that diet of eating more clean foods. Basically, that's all I wanted to say. And so I remember when I first went on the medication that works for me. Now listen, just because that medication works for me does not mean it's going to work for you. There's a lot of medication and things that I have tried that has not worked for me that worked for other people. Oh, I should probably tell you this part. The MTHFR gene mutation has to do with the way your body metabolizes folate. And so you have to take something special. Has to do with folic acid. And so I take something, I follow Dr. Charlie on Instagram. He is a wealth of knowledge. I will link him in the show notes. He's talked a lot about the MTHFR gene. He talks a lot about ADHD. He talks about a lot of that stuff. I've learned a lot from him. So I take one of the supplements that he recommends. Actually, I'm taking 3 supplements now that he recommends, and it has been super beneficial. But clearly, I'm not to a point where I can be off the medicine. I still take an antidepressant and I still take the ADHD meds. And where I was going and where I'm going to leave this episode is when I first got on it, I all of a sudden had energy. And for so many years, and this makes me really sad, for so many years, I have been drained and so tired. And I felt like I was worthless. Not really, but I'm like, man, why am I so tired? Why don't I have the energy that other people have? Well, once I got on the medication that I'm on now, and then felt my brain working the way it was supposed to all this time, I realized that my body pretty much exhausts all energy making up for my brain not working the way it's supposed to work. And so when my brain is working the way it's supposed to work, I have energy. I have been able to do more than I've ever been able to do. And I'm like, this is what normal people feel. This is why they can do the things that they do. Now, I'm not talking like I could go out and run a marathon. I still get tired. But man, there is a huge difference. And I kind of forgot about that because I started taking the medicine, and I'm like, that became my new normal. And 2 days without the medicine, and I'm kind of back. Yesterday, we went to a softball game, and afterwards, I wanted to make sure I closed my rings, and I literally came home and got in bed and was like, yeah, I'm done for the day. I didn't have the energy to just pull myself together and force myself to do it. And normally, I would force myself to do it because it's something that's important to me. And today, the same thing. Today, I had like all these little things happening, and it was the same kind of stuff that would normally happen. But today it bothered me even more. And I realized that the amount of anxiety that I'm feeling, and I can put my finger on it as it's showing up like anxiety, and I'm drained. I took a minute and was like, okay, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to walk away from my computer because I was working on web design stuff. I'm going to walk away from my computer. I'm going to go eat lunch. I went and ate lunch, which, by the way, was amazing. I had zucchini, like the zoodles or whatever. So I don't eat the gluten pasta. So I had zucchini noodles with sauce with like crushed peppers and a little bit of sausage. Sausage probably wasn't the best for me, but it was so good. So then after that, I was like, still feel bad. I'm going to go outside for a few. I went outside for a few. It still didn't feel good. So then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to take a nap because it's just exhausting me. And it's probably the first time I have needed to take a nap since I started that medication. And I don't even know when I started that medicine, but it's been a while. So all that to say, medication matters sometimes. I would love to say I don't need it, but I currently need it, and I have no shame in that. I am doing my part. I am trying to go to bed early. I'm trying to be outside as much as possible because that's proven to help those with ADHD. Keeping my space tidy is another thing that helps. When I'm feeling super overwhelmed or I can't focus, I look around, and if the area needs cleaned or it just looks disorganized, it's kind of my sign like, okay, let's get this organized. Sleep, move my body, be outside in nature. My diet, drink water, limit caffeine. Those are all the things I'm also doing, and then working on the supplements. I take 3 supplements right now. They're all related to the depression and anxiety. One is Inspiracell that Dr. Charlie recommends for those who have the MTHFR gene. And my child has that gene also, who also has ADHD. So there is definitely a correlation there. You can go to Google and you can find all kinds of interesting facts on ADHD and this gene mutation. So in the show notes, I'm going to go on and link a few articles that I found, but I just thought this was a great conversation to start. If you have struggled with anxiety, or you're always tired, or you just recognize that you can never focus, maybe you have ADHD and you just haven't been diagnosed. There are plenty of things that you can do that don't require medicine or pharmaceutical type medication. Maybe there's a supplement you can take. Maybe therapy. Therapy has been known to help. Writing things down. There's like lots and lots of like little coping skills that you can learn, and those have helped me a lot. I do brain dumping. Getting it out of my head and onto paper is really important, because then when I know that I need to do something, I'm like, oh, okay, that's what I do next. Not having to take like the bandwidth of my brain to remember things. If I can do things like in a routine, that helps. There's so much we can talk about. But I want to keep this episode short and sweet, to the point, just starting the conversation. If you think that you may have ADHD, like, listen, it is a superpower, but there's no shame in it either. And there are some struggles that you may need to work through. And I want to challenge you to confront it head on and not be afraid of it, because I think sometimes we just want to put our head in the sand and pretend like it's not there when it is. And once we know that it's an issue, we can actually work towards resolving the issue, if that makes sense. So until next time, friends. Hey friend, that's it for this episode. If you found value, I would love it if you could take a couple of seconds and leave me a quick review. While it may seem super simple, it is so beneficial and gives me the opportunity to help more women. Also, take a screenshot and share it on social media with your biggest aha today. Don't forget to tag me at MelissaBatOfficial so we can connect. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, friend, keep walking it out one baby step at a time, because God's got you.